Like every company, I think our journey started with both the sense of wonder of discovering ChatGPT on one night and be like, oh, this solves all our problem. All of a sudden, all of the qualitative parameters I mentioned, there's something there. And unlike the incessant VC mandate that then you get from your board, and like, so what's your AI strategy? It's been 2 days now. What you have to have. So I was the painful CEO with like, we need to do something there. And I think that we have a great product team that were very intentional about the way that they thought about AI. We've seen a lot of like AI for the sake of AI, and our approach has been a lot more intentional, which sometimes has translated to taking a bit more time to figure out exactly what we needed to build, which kind of relates to our time to write, right? It was not how fast we push something to market. It was how fast can we deliver something that's actually going to be valuable for our users. And so with that, we just equipped the team with like, this is your mandate. Go figure out what we can do with this technology. And they took that and they basically identified different moments in the product journey where AI could be a massive delight, where AI all of a sudden unlocked things that we were not able to do.
This is Deployed, the AI product podcast, and I'm your host, Ian Cairns, co-founder and CEO of FreePlay. Hey everyone, welcome back to Deployed. We're fortunate today to talk with Jo Widawski and Thomas Mary. They're the co-founders of Maze. Maze helps product development teams do better user research so they can figure out what customers want and build the right thing faster. They help not just professional user researchers, but also designers, product managers, engineers, product marketers, whoever wants to learn about what customers think and how they can make a product better. And they've been working with some of the biggest companies in the world. They have thousands of customers today. They get to work with companies like JP Chase and IBM. And over the last year, they've brought generative AI into a bunch of different parts of their product. They've really woven it throughout the product experience. There's no separate chatbot. There's no separate AI experience. They've just used generative AI to make the core product better. So this conversation is great. They talk a bunch about how they think about product design, where they've incorporated generative AI, where it's worked and where it hasn't. Jo shares some thoughts about what the impact has been for the business, how it's made a difference for sales and differentiating their product. And then they also talk about what they've done to build capacity in their product development team to work with generative AI, how they've thought about, teaching more people on the team to work with these kinds of tools and be successful. So lots of good experience here, lots of good lessons learned. Hope you enjoy the conversation. Let's jump in. All right, everybody, welcome to the show. I'm joined today by Jo Widawski and Thomas Mary at Maze, and they are going to share some of their experiences and lessons learned building AI features for user researchers. Jo, Thomas, it's great to have you both here. Can you give us an intro to like who are you, what's your role at Maze, and where are you in the world today?
That's good. Certainly. So I'm Thomas. I'm in France right now. I'm an engineer at Art, and I've co-founded Maze with Jo 7 years ago now. Co-founder of Sopath. Jo.
Yeah, Jo, Paris born and raised, hence the funny accent that I think you'll hear throughout this podcast. Yeah, lived in New York for the past 2 years, just got back in Paris, but kind of living in between Paris and New York. And then, before Maze, we worked together with Thomas for many, many years, even before Maze. Before that, I was leading design and research in some of the best agencies in Paris, where my role was teaching people how to do design and research and then ultimately sell these things. So it's a problem that's very dear and near to my heart. Happy to talk about the genesis of Maze and how AI plays a part of that vision and journey now.
And I'd love to hear you jump in. Like will say from my side, I became a Maze customer in my last company. I was leading product and design at this company, First Base. We loved it. We relied on it. Our designers, didn't have a full-time research team. So you all helped us do research without having dedicated researchers. So it was a great product to use. But yeah, tell us the story more. Where did it come from? What brought you guys together? What's the problem you're trying to solve for the world?
Yeah, I'll tell my side of the story, and then Thomas, if you want to add on to your side. But so having worked agencies for so many years, I saw firsthand the problem of going to clients and saying, basically, you have two options. We can build the wrong thing in 2 weeks, or we can figure out what to build in the next 3 months by bringing people in our office and running the user interview. That was part of my job, right? That was what I did day to day. It was to convince people that by the time they could push something to production 5 times, we would have time to learn once. And so the general wisdom from the market, like it's not a unique thing to the agency world, it's something that every company experiences, right? Having to choose between being fast or being right. And we believe it's a false trade-off, right? We believe companies shouldn't have to choose between building fast and building right. And so we built a research platform that's purpose-built for speed and democratization. We try to help organizations of all sizes. We sell to small startups all the way to the JPMC and IBM of the world in every industry, where we also sell to the least mature markets out there, right? Not every company is a B2B SaaS tech company that knows how to do research already. And then more importantly, we sell and we provide research to everyone within those organizations, meaning that less than 20% of our customer base are user researchers. We power research for designers, product managers, product marketers, with the real belief that anyone that has to make decisions throughout the product development process should have the means to make those decisions on their own. And so we've been doing that for the past 7 years, as Thomas mentioned. We power a bit more than 100,000 companies today and more than 4,000 customers across a range of everything, size of organization, etc. So it's been a fun, challenging journey. And today we are very proud that we're on our path to making our mission available, right? With just like your former company, helping organizations that don't have the maturity to do research,
Yeah, on top of that, what excites me the most is solving that problem that we both experienced back in the day. Myself as an engineer, I worked for the startup that built very fast, but wrong all the time. And so for years, I had my team of engineers like building and rebuilding the same variation of the same product, but just failing to deliver on the value. So it was kind of funny that at the time we started working on Maze and I was failing to deliver actual value. I'm very excited to get that from him.
Yeah, exactly. I think just like Thomas said, I think the fact that today 50% of developers' time is still spent on rework and that 9 out of 10 product features and releases fail is kind of a testament to the end of an era, right? This move fast and break things era where the common wisdom was you just push something to production and you learn from production. I think that now technology has finally enabled us to not really have to choose and to be able to learn as you go out and not put the experiment in front of your users and have them be the guinea pig of the growth team and the product team, right? I think that one thing that's very beneficial with all of this is that at the end of the day, you create the right products for your users, and those companies that do that will win, right? That's the key belief behind all of this.
Yeah, and as a product leader, you're speaking my language. I'd love for that to always be true, right? I think
exactly.
You all are working on a hard problem and one that everybody needs solved in the software space, especially. You were early to thinking about generative AI, maybe a year ago, published a bit of a manifesto that I read and was inspired by. You just talked about this problem, some of this stuff, democratizing access to research, helping people use technology to get to the right answer faster. Talk about how AI fits into that vision. What does that look like for you all?
So for me, there's been a large focus when people talk about AI, about the tactical implementation of AI, right? And it's important, right? For us, for example, if you think about the main challenges of research is difficult because most people don't have the know-how internally to do the research. And when you're on a mission to democratize, it's even truer because all of a sudden you're trying to make designers do research or product managers do research, right? If you think about our journey, you have this massive circle of people who want to do research, and then you have this tiny circle inside of the people that can actually do research. And we've worked very hard on pushing the boundaries of that circle. And the thing that's exciting about the tactical implementation of AI is that all of a sudden it kind of accelerate us pushing those boundaries, because all of a sudden you have micro assistants throughout the entire product experience to tell you how to build a study that's going to be able to yield great results, analyzing the data, all of the things that make AI implementation so interesting. But from a business leader perspective, the thing that's very interesting for me is how it shifts the center of gravity in future organizations. So at the strategic level, when you think about what AI will do to the broader market and to the broader space, because companies were so focused for the past 20 years on time to market, all of a sudden everyone has the means to build, right? So AI basically leveled the playing field. Everyone has a great team of developer now, everyone has a great team of designer now. What does it mean for organization when everyone can build stuff? It means that all of a sudden the speed at which you build stuff it doesn't matter anymore. All of a sudden what you build is what matters, right? And so at Maze, we've coined that term time to write. And it's not so much of a net new concept. It's more than instead of optimizing your organization around how fast can we push something, so the output part of your organization, it becomes an outcome generating engine, right? And how fast can you get to the right product, and how fast can you get to the right idea in front of your audience? That's going to be the key factor that will make or break companies in an AI future. And what's exciting is that puts research as a center of gravity in those new organizations, or at least user insights, right? Because all of a sudden, if everything that matters is what you build, you need to understand your user needs and how they change constantly. So I'm excited about the tactical implementation, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that today. But I'm even more excited about the implication for the broader space.
Big picture, the story you're telling probably makes sense to a lot of people. Give us some practical details, especially for people that like maybe you're not experienced working with user research teams, like the tactics of what you're talking about. You mentioned a couple things, helping people build a study, analyzing data. But for anybody who's listening, it's like, cool guys, like what is the Maze product actually doing? Walk us through like what that looks like.
Yes.
Some like more detail.
So user research is a mix of a lot of different methods that go from unmoderated to moderated. And so in unmoderated, the goal is to do some quantitative analysis and studies. In moderated, you will run user interviews. Basically, you want to learn from your users about what they want from your product, the discovery part. And then if they understand the product you're building, that's the usability and the delivery part, right? So are we building the right thing? A. And then when we're building that thing, is it actually working? That's the B. We help you solve all the questions that happen throughout this entire journey. And we have 3 pillars in the product, really. We have a research pillar. So in the product, you can create studies, which is basically like blog building, right? You will add questions, surveys, usability tests. It's very easy. It's very consumable. You can think of us as like the Nespresso of research, right? Like you don't need really to know what you put in the system to get the coffee that you want outside of the system, right? That's what we've been building toward. And then from there, you can recruit, and we make it extremely easy to recruit from your own audience by sharing a link or by hiring from our panel. We have a marketplace of panel providers. So no matter how niche your needs are in terms of users, we can provide that to you in an instant. And then finally, we analyze all of this, right? And so one of the key principles we have is that it's not data, it's insights, right? And so we turn all of that like large unstructured data into something that makes sense. And our key historical strength was making that happen with large unstructured quantitative data. And maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of the conversation we're going to have, but when we started the company, when we started the company in 2018, one of the things that we couldn't really answer was, is quantitative going to be a replacement for qualitative data? Meaning, is quantitative going to get good enough that you will be able to bypass user interview? And it's something that we had a bit of a schizophrenia about, right? Like, because we were convinced of the value of the qualitative insights, but we didn't have a technological answer to it, right? How do you deal with this?
We're convinced by the text, like how fast you need to get the insights more than the tool itself.
Exactly. If our mission is to make user insights available at the speed of product development, how can we make qualitative data something that goes at the speed of product development? That was a challenge that technology didn't enable us to solve. And so for the longest time...
It's just a hard problem to solve too, right? Having worked with a big research team at Twitter, like if you want to set up a study and recruit people and bring people in, like it could take 2 weeks if you're being fast to get, 10, 20 people in and do the interviews. And then these quant studies you're talking about, people again like aren't close to it. You're talking about how do we get data from hundreds or thousands of people? Like you've got to design a good survey, you've got to get it out to the world, get people to respond to it, make sense of it all. So just like a little color for people that aren't involved. Like these things take weeks minimum and sometimes months to really get great high quality insights.
Exactly. And so for the best performing team, that's slow. And for the worst performing team, that's something they just don't do, right? And so the problem we had to solve was, for those that are already doing it, how do we make it better for them? And for those that are not doing it, how do we make it simpler? It creates a really unique challenge because you have to build for both the depth and the breadth in the product, right? All of a sudden, you have to have something that satisfies the need of a mature organization. And that's the challenge of democratization overall, right? And then at the surface level, you need to have something that's easy enough to consume that. I'm a junior designer in a startup and I still can use Maze to run my interview studies, to do my quantitative research, to run my usability test on my prototype. all of these things, we package them and purpose build them so that they're just very easy to do and consume.
Yeah, and it shows up. It's like the in-app kind of questions you can put in front of people, so you can kind of ask them the right question at the right time. They just did something in the app. Here's this thing that we want to know about your experience, right? Like that kind of stuff is the beginning, what people are probably used to seeing if they're using these kinds of products. Talk to us about like, what have you done from the standpoint of like building features with generative AI into this process? Where have you used it so far in the last year? Be great to just have a couple more of those examples, and then we can jump into kind of what you've learned building them and how that's come to life.
Maybe, Thomas, I can give the mandate, and then I'd love to have you talk about the tactical implement, like how we actually implemented them. So like every company, I think our journey started with both the sense of wonder of like discovering ChatGPT on one night and be like, oh, like this solves all our problem all of a sudden, like all of the quality parameters I mentioned, there's something there. And be on like the incessant VC mandate that then you get from your board and like, so what's your AI strategy? It's been 2 days now. What you have to have. So I was the painful CEO with like, we need to do something there. And I think that we have with Thomas and a great product team, that were very intentional about the way that they thought about AI. We've seen a lot of like AI for the sake of AI, and our approach has been a lot more intentional, which sometimes has translated to, taking a bit more time to figure out exactly what we need to build, which kind of relates to our time to write, right? It was not how fast we push something to market. It was how fast can we deliver something that's actually going to be valuable for our users. And so with that, we just equipped the team with like, this is your mandate, go figure out what we can do with this technology. And they took that, and they basically identified different moments in the product journey or in our product journey where AI could be a massive delighter, right? Where AI all of a sudden unlocked things that we were not able to do. And maybe, Thomas, you want to walk us through those features?
I think there were really two approaches to the first one was to look for radical shifts and like how could this new technology unlock that we were not able to do before. And that was the first feature that we developed that we call the dynamic follow-up, which is basically a way to let GPT to create follow-up question on your open-ended survey questions. That really helped bridge the gap between moderated and unmoderated, giving a bit more ability for diving into the why on, at scale. So that really like the first feature that we thought could bring that shift. And we tend to do that exercise to look at what can we do with that new technology and what will be the local improvements, like what could be the quick wins. You can think about like adding summary to the survey that kind of makes sense. Everyone is already doing that and putting, that survey data and transfer the data that way. So it kind of makes sense to include that in the product. So there's two aspects that we looked at, I guess, both when GPT 3 and 4 came out, but also like for every new big model upgrade. So GPT 4o, or 1 recently, like we tried to look for both those radical shifts and local improvements and see, how much value you can get out of those and match with the rest of our priorities.
I heard you mention the dynamic follow-up. So, you serve a question to somebody who's using an app, they answer a survey question. Now it's like there's a user researcher in the room. You can just ask an open-ended follow-up question and learn more. The other one I think you mentioned was surveying or summarizing survey data, making sense of everything that you get back. Are there other things since then that you've created in the product? Are those like two good examples? What else exists today?
One I personally like because it helps to democratize research and help non-researchers to get started is what we call the perfect question. We basically give a way for anyone to create or rewrite their questions, removing bias and explaining also what is the bias in the question they have. So that really remove the cold start problem. When you are not a researcher, you haven't run a lot of research, you often face how do I get that insight? What questions should I ask? And very often you've got your own bias thinking, in your question. So AI helps a lot also to remove some of those bias. And this perfect question feature is a great example of that. Also helps reassure researcher that there will be less bias in the research that the company is running. So one that is,
Those are the kinds of features that are like, I struggle. I don't know if you guys have a name for this. I struggle to explain to people what these things are. I think everyone would think about generative AI in a product, they imagine a chatbot first, especially if they're new to this space. Or, if you're more in the tech world, you're thinking about agents and these kinds of autonomous actions that are happening. But these really straightforward things that are just embedded in an app that make the core user experience better. I remember one of the first ones we ran into was the team at Loom. They built an early generative AI feature to just give a title to a video after the transcript was created. And this was like this big metric mover because before the titles were just timestamps. Now people have a better title to click on. What you guys are describing there, the perfect question, it's this great use of generative AI in my mind where getting a good unbiased question is hard, right? We had PhD, social scientists on our teams at Twitter helping, other folks scope and craft these questions. And it took a lot of discipline and expertise to make sure you're designing a good survey. I get what you're saying, a little moment of magic in the product to help somebody do the right thing.
I remember when we built the dynamic follow-up the first time, like we had that excitement and rush to want to get it out as soon as possible. And quite a few people in the team wanted to have that chatbot experience, just because that's new, that's exciting. But I think, and that's kind of like what we used so far to developing our AI feature, like to think about the solution and the needs, not so much about like pushing the AI, in the forefront. And so one of the first improvement that we made to that feature was to remove the conversational tone and for the generated question to feel more like the follow-up question was drafted in advance by the researcher. I think it's important for this AI feature to be well embedded within the product more than being just there for the sake of it.
When I hear that dynamic follow-up question, like you're asking a survey question, you get this follow-up, I would have expected this just manifests like a chatbot. And you were saying it was actually helpful to take the conversational tone away, make it not feel like you were in this chat conversation, but getting a formal research question.
That was very much like it, where the follow-up question usually started with, "Oh, thank you for saying that, blah, blah, blah. Can you tell me more about why you said X?" Whereas we just wonder, why did you say X? Like that's really the key question. The conversation is just noise around it. So,
yeah, I mean, this is a meta question considering what you guys do with your product, but how did you learn that was a better way to do things? What did you do to get customer feedback? How did you measure what high quality experience even looked like in that scenario?
So we did some research up front, and we also used made great feedback on the new feature that we truly. So that's kind of what we use for dynamic follow-up to make sure that we're building something that makes sense for user. And this one we're pretty convinced. But generally speaking, that's what we do. Yeah.
Did that conversational tone point come up in the feedback from users, or is it something that your team just realized as experts? How did you decide that, like, wait, we should move away from that?
Well, this one specifically, we used our guts more than the research, and we had a few feedbacks from early adopters of ChatGPT that kind of wanted that conversational tone. But again, it doesn't resonate with what we're trying to solve. So it really felt like going with the trend more than solving the actual need. So in the end, we went for removing that conversational tone for that reason, because we really want the user to, jump to the next question and don't feel like they are having a conversation. In the same way, when I've got the chatbot on my bench talking to me about X and Y, don't really want to go deep and feel like it's a bot. And that was also the reason, like trying to be as human as possible.
Yeah. And many times what we have learned, I think, through the time is that with AI, there's a trust relationship between the users and the product that's shifting, right? So if you think about the researchers, like the researcher's job is very hard because you're basically in a distrustful environment, right? Like your job is basically to go to people and to say, this is what we've done in the past 3 months and this is why you're wrong. And then you have the culture or not to accept the feedback. But all of a sudden with AI, what we've learned is that trust has shifted left. All of a sudden it's the researchers that are asking the AI to show the proof, right? And so the burden of proof doesn't sit on them, it sits on the AI to show how did you come to that conclusion? How did you make sense of the data to generate that insight? what's interesting is that in a lot of the way that we integrated that UX, so for example, we do transcripts and then we surface insights and then we create a report automatically from those insights that surface themes. And that's what we delivered at first. And all of a sudden we had researchers asking us, I want to see the data. Like, I won't trust the report, which was a funny moment, right? It was a very meta moment because they were the ones that were doing the job of the PMs when they were presenting the report. What we did was we then added every piece of insight inside the report as well, so that if the researcher wanted to make sure that we were generating those insights from the right place, they could actually backtrack it. It's a lot of those feedback loops that we've integrated to build our product. The same thing for the perfect question, right? When you think about what is the biggest challenge for a researcher right now to democratize, is like, my designers are going to ask shit question and then we cannot use the data anymore, right? And we've burned through the cards of like asking our users. So that relationship of trust as well is that I as a researcher need to trust the results, but to trust the result, I need to trust that you're going to help my designers, product managers actually do the work that I would have done one-on-one with them. How do you create a product that shows trust? That's an interesting new challenge of AI that we never really had to think about, which I find fascinating in itself.
Yeah, this is a common story that you take a deliverable that a human would have come up with before, and the scrutiny bar is just way higher if it's being generated by AI.
Yeah,
people just they want to see the work more. They don't trust it naturally, and so it sounds like you found some ways to include those in the product. What else have you learned about just creating a good user experience for your customers? What have you had to discover along the way to make the AI product features work better?
I think maybe not very new, but it's not always right. The generated, one of the key things to make sure that not only they can review what has been generated, but they can also edit and change. Seems like an obvious thing to do, but I haven't seen it everywhere in other products. And yeah, that just helps with that trust again, like being able to not only review, but pick those problems, knowing that it's not going to be fully right all the time.
What do you do about that? Is there some way that the product addresses it? What do your customers say? I'm just like curious how you've addressed it.
Other than allowing them to edit, so far, not much other than listening to their feedback. And like recently we had an issue with accuracy on the theme creation, and that came up into support. And that's kind of also one way how we identify those issues. So just listening to those feedbacks, and we use, we talk with Maze, so we collect a lot of insights, and so we kind of hear the little stories here and there of inaccuracy, or there's something weird here, or the summary is not in the right language. That happened a couple of times. So we're able to pick up on those little things and then identify the issue and eventually solve it.
Yeah, that's kind of also a very meta point given who we are talking to today, but the whole UX of how you prototype, how do you monitor, how, like, all of this has to be built as well, right? I feel like the foundation of non-deterministic path of how people can use your product, and then how do you solve for that at the UX level, is something that has not been fully solved yet. So we are still kind of all in the midst of trying to figure it out. But yeah, it's such a fascinating problem. And for us, how do you, at the design level, right? How do you prototype those things? Like, how do you prototype non-deterministic? What does it mean? What does it mean for the future of how products are going to be built? You have to think about those stuff. And when I think about what we wished we knew, or like how have things evolved, we were prompted by one of our board members very recently. We have this unique challenge where you need to play where the puck is, and you also need to play where the puck's going to be 5 years from now. And if you assume the trend line of how fast AI has been accelerating, what does it mean for your product, your space in 5 years? And early on, there was a big question about, is this a cap? Is it a net new cap that we've reached in AI, and then we all build around that technology and it's going to be incremental improvement? Or is this like a slope? And if it's a slope, what does it mean? Like, should we start prototyping for what AI is going to be a year from now? Can we just assume that AI is going to be a lot faster, a lot better, a lot more? Can we just take the assumption? And I think a year out now, we can kind of assume that that's going to be the case, right? With what we're seeing going out, we know now that we're not so much of like the slope is going this way. So I think there's a lot of like, how do we think ahead of how do we assume the models are just going to get exponentially better, and what does it mean for us, and should we build product for that and not for?
Yeah, one feels like it just changed things again. I was using it this weekend and tried to work on a problem that I would have usually asked a model to solve with code, and now it just answers the question. It can do the reasoning on its own. So do you have thoughts on that, right? Like, do you have, anything that you all feel like you're going to do differently or you are doing differently in your product thinking and design process and prototyping? Take that into account. What do you do as an organization?
I'll talk more about the vision piece. For us, we knew that there was a way technologically to solve the quantitative, large, unstructured data. We never knew there was a qualitative, large, unstructured data the problem that we could solve in our lifespan of Maze, right? So all of
the technology just changed overnight on you, and that was
exactly. So you will all wake up with this, and now we have to solve that new problem. And so there's a question about how so for us, for example, there's a question about user insights are everywhere, right? And we are in the business of collecting those insights. There's already been a consolidation in our space of user research platforms. Everyone went from point solution to this massive platform. What I believe is that we're going to see more and more consolidation where a lot of jobs to be done, like survey software, like product analytics, basically where your user voice lives, all of that has to be consolidated somewhere. Because at the end of the day, one of my favorite saying is the best research software is McKinsey, right? You go to McKinsey and you say, hey, I have a question. And then 3 months later, they come back with they abstracted the whole method. They abstracted everything they've done. They just show you the result, right? The companies that manage to do that the best, right? The one that can leverage that technology to say, you go from a business question to a business outcome. Those are the ones that are going to win. The means in between those things are going to disappear. And so for us that are in the business of means, right? We're in the business of usability testing. How do we move past that? How do we move from assisted research to automated research? What does the gap look like?
Going back to something, Jo, you mentioned briefly, what does your process look like if you're trying to think about bringing something to life, like your unmoderated questions? What have you learned over the past year about tactically? Maybe you could even talk us through an example. How do you prototype? How do you test? How do you know when something's working well enough to put it in front of a customer?
I think the bulk of the work that we're doing is a lot more on the discovery than on the delivery these days, right? So it's a lot more about understanding our customer's problem than it is about understanding the solution market fit is very hard to assess, I find, with AI products, because the reality is those prototyping, the prototyping tools that historically supported us doing that delivery part of the process are harder, right? Figma doesn't prototype well with this stuff. So you are always very framed in the way that you can think about solution market fit almost. So we spend a lot of time on identifying problems and problems that are worth solving. So the perfect question, I think, is a perfect example of that. It seems so minor, right? It seems so in the product, it's almost invisible. And if there was not an AI craze right now, we wouldn't even have a button that's an AI button. It would just be in the product, automated. But that's a perfect example of that, because you can take the problem that's a massive problem of how do we get researchers to trust our product to democratize the research practice. And the actual solution to that is the tiniest feature of rewriting question to remove bias and explaining to designers why there was a bias in that question. So we are doing both jobs of the researchers. We are doing the rewriting and we are doing the education part of this as well. That to me is the way that we identify those problems, and then we go and solve it with the MVP of a solution, and we see how that sticks for development in the market. And for us, we've seen a massive uplift of usage from that. For our sales rep, it's kind of those delighters moment of oh wow, no one will voice that this is what they want, right? It's the faster horses all over again. But all of a sudden it's oh wow, that's what I've been needing for a very long time, to trust the software to do that job well.
For this one, what they maybe wanted is for the AI to create the whole test by themselves. That what we've seen also is there's so much free work to be done. There is no education. There is the gap was too big, and so we just defaulted to work on the atomic and what can be delivered and makes a lot of value and is a huge delighter compared to wow, it's magic. So in that case, we prefer defaulting to our templates, and you can use that to get started, and then just rephrase to perfectly match what you're looking for. Again, going back to have a deep understanding of the problem you're trying to solve and following to the hand, I guess.
There's something that Joe mentioned along the lines there about your sales reps and this helping in the sales process, seeing this moment of delight. It made me curious, like, how are you selling this? How do you introduce AI features to your customers? Are you selling as a separate SKU? It'd be just cool to hear you talk about how you've presented it and if you've changed anything or shifted along the way, what you've done.
AI has been both a solution and a problem, especially as you go into the enterprise. So there's a lot of defiance, there's a lot of regulation. It's still the Wild West in some ways, and Europe is, as always, very good at putting restrictions around everything. So everyone, I think, is still trying to figure it out. So it depends on who's ultimately the buyer of our software. What's interesting with Maze is that we both power organization where the researcher is our main point of contact that then trying to democratize to the rest of the product organization. But sometimes it will be the director of product, a VP of product, a VP of design. So depending, they will care actually about very different things, right? Like the rewriting of the question will matter less to the director of design than it will matter to the VP of user research. So for us, there's also like how we cater our pitch around AI to the right audience about, is it about building trust with your team, or is it about building trust with the results, or is it about, so that is dependent on who we are talking to. And then there's a lot of just highlighting where AI is being used and how. That's just now a part of the process. So as we implemented it, I think it's a unique thing where that as you implement it, you have to make it able to be disabled.
Have you had to turn it off for people? Do you have a lot of customers that say, I don't want this on for whatever reason?
Too many customers there. There is a lot of value out of it. Just thinking about it, you were wondering about data point. I just remember that one of the early data points that we had of the moderated AI feature is we cut the time by 4, the time it takes to analyze the user interview. And so when you disable that, you just lose so much revenue.
Yeah. Sometimes it comes from a place of just not wanting to deal with the red tape that comes with it. It's easier to swipe a credit card, and it's easier to not have to deal with having to make the case in the pitch for AI. I hope that businesses will mature, but we know that the technology growth curve never really aligns with the maturity of organization. And so for many years to come, the enterprise conversation about AI is going to be interesting. And I'm sure there's going to be businesses built like the Ventas of the world that are going to be built around giving visibility into AI for enterprise buyers.
Yeah. I feel like we're starting to see some of that. People that are helping with audit and otherwise, especially the security and PII side.
Yeah.
How would you describe what the net impact has been to the Maze product, to the Maze business, to your customers? Like, as you have added AI features and been investing in this area for a year now, how do you think about where is it today? Where do you hope it's going to be a year from now?
Yeah. So we're in a space that's pretty crowded. User research, there's a lot, like the category in itself is pretty massive if you account for like the Qualtrics, the survey, like there's just a lot of people in the broader space. So with sameness come the need for differentiation, and our differentiation was all about democratization and the technology that supported it. And all of a sudden AI allows us to just create those delighters in the product that support that even more. A lot of those micro investments that we've made in AI, like when we deliver something that we feel is small, has an outsized impact in our capacity both to sell, but also to sell our vision. So those two things go hand in hand. And then the thing as well is there's a perception of speed for companies that have been able to embed AI in their product in the past year. And so for us that are existing in a very incumbency space, where there's a lot of people that have been here for 20 years and we're seeing that they're not innovating. They don't have the means to be able to innovate again and to embed those systems. There's also you don't buy the bake-off, you buy the curve, right? And so they look at the company and they're like, oh, you're on this trajectory, but everyone else is on this trajectory. So it's not so much about the AI itself, it's about what does it say about your company and how fast it can innovate.
I'm just thinking about this idea of the bake-off versus the curve. It sounds like people are placing you all at that front end of the curve in this ecosystem today and saying what's here today is great. We see where you all are going to be. They're trusting you more as a result. Does that feel like one of the key impact areas? Yeah,
exactly. I think everyone wants to have answers and they want to bet on the right horse. Buying software is not buying software. It's a commitment that this is how your organization is going to grow. This is, for us, often we're like first research software they purchase, right? So it's also a commitment to being able to learn as an organization. They want to make sure that the tool they use are going to support the journey that we're all headed in the next 5 to 10 years with AI.
That's actually an interesting topic too. I think everybody's trying to figure out what the software development organization of the future looks like. A year ago, I know, Thomas, you were doing a bunch of prototyping on your own. Like, you're a year in now, the team's really like bought into this, the product's working. How do you both think about the evolution of your team, of the org, like who's doing this work in order to bring more and more of the AI benefits to life in the product over time?
I think that we started, and because we were idiots with like the AI mandate, we were like, oh, we're going to create an AI pod and they're going to work on AI feature. And when we started Maze, there was a point, like every company you grow, you have some UX depth and some technological depth. And what we said at the time was we're going to create a delight pod and they're going to work on delighters on the product. We never did it because after like 2 days of thinking it through, we're like, this is a dumb idea. And it's very much like AI, right? Like AI is a piece of technology that needs to support the entire journey, just like delight is a piece of, like, it's not something that you outsource to a pod. It's something that you embed in the way that teams need to be thinking. Like, they need to incorporate that this is a technology that needs to be available to build stuff. So in that way, we try to embed AI. One of the challenges that we've seen, right, is that because it's a net new technology, we haven't built a muscle, like a very strong muscle yet on having the AI expert, having the people. Like, there's when you hire someone that sets the bar for this is what excellence will look like for someone that will work with AI. I think that's a lot of what we're trying to build toward now. It's building that DNA in the company so that we can support our journey ahead.
In our use case of generative AI is fairly simple. We rely on OpenAI, so we don't need special skills, special roles, and so it makes more sense to have every pod in our team work towards what's most important. And if AI the right solution for that local problem, then be it, and not trying to force AI everywhere by adding an AI pod, which was, I guess, the error that we've made.
I think that evolution's been common in a lot of teams that we've worked with. And it's, I'm hearing you say like it wasn't the right decision. I've also seen cases where it's like, well, it was the right decision initially for 3 months or something. People kind of learned the tactics and then they've got to fan it out. But it sounds like you all are in that fan out stage. What are you doing tactically, or what have you done that's been helpful to ramp people up? We've seen a lot of engineers, designers, product people that are a little bit deer in headlights at first when they're thinking about, how do I actually use this in my product? I'm curious what you've done to empower your teams or help them ramp up.
I can talk about this for a quick second about so that AI pod was I think you put it really well. It was not a mistake at the time. It was a mistake to keep it, right? I think the AI pod, we basically assembled the people that were both, I think, some of the most engineering forward, design for, like, the people that wanted to think about those problems, that were excited about them. And then when you create those team of champions, when you ultimately split the pod, you end up with like just the pollination of like that sense of wonder in every other pod, right? So I wouldn't do it differently. I think that was the right way to do it. You just need to find like the champions that are going to be like, it's kind of the case for everything, right? Like, they're going to be carrying the beacon of light for others to follow. I don't think, though, like, AI is something that I don't think you have to push a lot of people to be interested about, especially in product. Like my tangent on AI is, it's been very exciting, right? Like, there's something just 2 years ago, I think everyone kind of lost a lot of the sense of wonder about technology. So both the recession that made it terrible for everyone, but also on top of that, just, are we all just going to be B2B SaaS? Is that all there is, right? Like, everything technology has to offer is yet another either marketplace or a B2B SaaS software type of business. So I feel like there's just a uncharted territory vibe that you don't have to push a lot of people to be excited about as well.
Yeah. Everybody wants to build their career and gain experience in this area. It's easy to get people to say, yes, I want to work on that pod. Then there are a bunch of hard lessons to learn, right? I often talk about it this way, right? Generative AI feels like this new building material in software. It's like non-deterministic, like the models change underneath of you. You have to monitor and test more often. How do you approach figuring out the right way to build with this change in technology?
Well, initially we didn't have much in place. We had the chance to have Maze to success some insights, but we, until recently, never had the tools to really act on those. And that's also where FreePlay come to play. It's a good tool to test changes and monitors over time as well, which is a big change. And that's kind of what we are trying to do now, is to like make guidelines on how to create fixes, how to make things, how to test, and team being able to run into that. And so people have been very helpful in that sense to really help us iterate on those features.
Love hearing that.
What made us make the switch was changing models without properly testing it. We ended up with problems that, as you would expect, for quite a while, and we didn't know about it until it was too late and in the customer's hands. So now we've got ways to do that in a safe way and not put experiments out of the.
Yeah, that's cool. And it sounds like there's some kind of process education you're doing internally where you're saying like, here's kind of the playbook for how you work on these features.
And one of the key learnings here as well for me is building those features really a key sports. And that's, I remember our first conversation where I was not fully on board with the point that CM should own that part, and the prompt is fine in the code base and engineers should own that, test that, and deliver. I think I changed my mind now and very much agree on having the domain experts working very hand to hand on that problem. Yeah, it was one of the key learning that I wish I knew earlier.
I'd love to pull the thread on it, but we're running short on time. Parting thought, like if is there anything else that you feel like maybe the one lesson learned in the last year, something you would have wished you knew a year ago that you'd share with other leaders working in this space?
I guess on my end, a very simple one that kind of relates to our vision for research, but kind of relates to our vision for how product needs to be built. I advise a lot of like early stage founders. So it's not so much of a learning that we had internally because we went through those problems in the past, but AI just accelerated that. It's the value first, right? It's the solving a customer problem first. And then the technology, like all of this is a supporting piece to solving a customer problem. Like you don't start from a solution and then you build outward from that. And I think because AI facilitated a lot of solution building over like problem solving, we saw a lot of that. And that's true both at the company building level, but also just at the simple feature building level, right? And it's also about creating a culture that celebrates shutting down the stuff that are not going to be valuable. So for us, for example, we built very similar to Loom, like the auto naming of product. That was not a very successful feature. That's something that we tested out and no uplift. People were not struggled to find the folder. Maybe there could have been more work done there. The reality is you can't force customer value, right? Like it either provides value to someone or not. So start there. And then AI is like just a building piece, just like everything else to deliver value.
Yeah. The story doesn't change about how you build valuable products.
No, it doesn't.
Same with AI. Well, Thomas, Jo, it's been great talking with you. Thank you for making the time. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your insights with everybody. And if people are listening, they haven't seen Maze before, go check out maze.co. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you. It was great talking to you today.
You're welcome. Thanks. All right, that's all we have for today's episode of Deployed, the AI Product Podcast. I'm Ian Cairns, the CEO and co-founder of FreePlay. I hope you enjoyed listening. And if you did, we'd love to hear about it. Your reviews mean a lot. They help other listeners. So give us a like, share, subscribe, wherever you're listening to this. And if something stood out to you in the episode, or if you've got feedback or ideas for a future episode, or if you simply just want to learn what we're up to at FreePlay, shoot me a note. I'm Ian at freeplay.ai. You can also find me on Twitter @Cairns. Thanks so much for listening.